Roll call, please.
Mr. Sorensen.
Here.
Mrs. Geiger.
Here.
Mrs. Labuda.
Here.
Mr. Steingart. Mrs. Edwards.
Here.
If you'll please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Before we go to the discussion on tax certiorari's, we had a presentation that was scheduled today on the Upper Delaware Scenic and Recreational River by the National Park Service. However, they were contacted several days ago and were notified that they had federal representatives visiting them yesterday and today. So they are unable to attend as they had to accommodate the visits from the federal representatives. I do want to take this opportunity though to state the great importance of having the Upper Delaware Scenic and Recreational River designation and the value of having the National Park Service here in Sullivan County. I think it's been a tremendous asset to our community. We're the largest national park in New York State, and I believe the only wild and scenic recreational river in the Northeast. So it is a tremendous asset. The National Park Service is under pressure, as many federal agencies are, with sequestration and other budget cuts. And I would like to have consensus of the legislature just to send our letter, a letter of support for funding for the National Park Service here in Sullivan, for the Upper Delaware, to our congressional representatives and state representatives, just showing the importance and the value that we see in having the National Park Service here. So I would, just to show of hands, like to have consensus to do that.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%, yeah.
I think, they've been a really good fit for the community. I think there's been a lot of benefit, and we can show our support by doing that. I do know
Maybe
that
Channel 13 could do something with it.
Oh,
Because Channel 13 has recently done something with the national parks. Maybe we could get them to contact the Upper Delaware group to contact Channel 13.
Channel 13? Okay, it's a good suggestion. I think we should certainly explore that. I have heard through the grapevine, I have not had time to speak with National Park Service Director Sean McGinnis, but I understand that with some of the tentative budget cuts that they're facing, it may affect their ability to manage the rent of their office space in Narrowsburg. So I'm going to ask Josh just to have a follow-up conversation with Sean to see what the status of that is. But I think we can also reflect that in our letter to our congressional representatives about the need for the support, for their funding support. So
Are you writing the letter, Alan? Is it?
As soon as I get a little more details, I'll
Okay.
work with Jill and Josh to
Okay.
put a letter together, and then we'll get a
Awesome.
copy in everyone's inbox.
Good.
Can I add to that, Alan?
Sure.
Because one of the reasons that, we had this discussion about having him come is that aside from the sequestration, there are a lot of services that they provide that Sullivan County could be taken advantage of that we're not.
Okay.
And one that really stood out in my mind is how they have supported in Lowell, Massachusetts, their annual, it's a really, really huge program every summer. And one of the things that we could be doing that we're not doing is taking advantage of some of these services, to sort of expand the reach that we have with the 250,000 visitors that come through the Delaware River every year.
Yeah.
So, sequestration aside, it's important for them to be able to show that the money that there is available is coming to New York State.
Yeah.
We share that with New York State, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. So we want to be able to get our share of the tax money, because as we all know, New York State is a net donor state to the feds, and we don't always get back what we put in, and we really need to be able to show that we're pulling the money back.
Absolutely. No, that's a very good point. Yeah, I mean, it really is a tremendous resource that we have here in the county, so.
So Alan, are they gonna come back next month?
I would hope so, yes. And certainly that invitation stands.
Yeah, because,
and-
I think Cora touched on a good point as far as maybe them bringing to the next committee meeting what we could be tapping into, if there's something, you know, that they support or programs that they offer that maybe we're not aware of, that we could
That was
pass
the
on to
agenda.
our, you know, town boards and our constituents.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll look at all those options.
Okay, we can ask questions that day too.
Yeah. Okay. With any other questions on that topic? If not, I'd like to get into the discussion on the tax certioraries. Linda Levine is here to talk a little bit about that. And
Well, I think I defer to Ira
You're gonna
on this one.
All right, I'm sorry. Okay. Ira, we defer to you. I'm sorry, I had spoken to Linda, so.
That's okay. I mean, this is a joint effort. We discussed it at the advisory board this
Yeah.
week. It's a subject I've talked about for years, because under state law, the towns are the assessing units. We don't get directly involved in assessing issues, and more importantly, in the litigation where assessments are reduced, unless we get court permission to intervene as a party, or we intervene by consent of the other parties. This is an annual event. Assessing happens every year. Every property is reassessed every year. So if a person challenges their assessment, oftentimes that challenge is not resolved in a year. If you challenge your 2011 assessment, you often have to then challenge your 2012 assessment, and maybe even your 2013 assessment before it gets resolved. So the aggregate impact is enormous and affects us, even though we're not the assessing unit, and although we're not a party, we're a taxing jurisdiction. We have, by rule of thumb, about a 20% interest in the tax bill, as do the towns, and the schools have about, give or take, a 60% interest. But the litigation and the defense of the assessment is handled in the absent, unless somebody like the county and or the school intervene, is handled strictly by the town and the town assessor and the town attorney. And you know, I see these court orders, they come to me, and after a matter has been resolved, then we may have to make the refunds and then charge them back, or get the money back from the other tax districts. But I look at some of these and say, we should be involved in the more important ones. Over the years, we've done this to some success, with some success. A few years ago, Nancy and I, Sam and I, personally visited, every township. But you got to do this every year. We got to put something in place so that we have a system in place where we work with the towns and the schools and identify the properties that have an important impact on our tax rolls, and work together, whether the towns stay as assessing units or eventually that becomes a county responsibility is a different but related subject. But however that's done, I think we have to participate more than we've done in the past. We discussed at the meeting this, which is the 2013 tax cert list. If you want to file it, if an owner wants to file a tax cert, it has to be filed within a month of the filing of the final tax roll. Since the final tax roll is usually done in July, by the end of August, an owner would have to file it. And so we put this list together at this time of the year. There still will be some coming in, but the aggregate assessed value of the parcels on this list, and this list is only 3.5 pages, is close to $70 million. In other words, if everybody on this list had filed this year, just for 2013 assessment roll, which affects the 2014 tax roll, aggregate assessed value of the county will go down $69+ million.
That's the 20% that goes to the county.
No,
That's
no.
not-
No, that's total.
Okay.
That's total. That's not taxes, it's assessed value. I have here the 2012, which is close to $90 million. So if somebody has an 11 and a 12 and assume they're all duplicates, which they're not, but some of them are, I mean, you're talking about an enormous amount of money. So one of the things we talked about at advisory board is, and Mr. Yasgur, who's here, is actually made the proposal at the advisory board, is, agrees that we need to be more proactive in these. Sam can speak for himself, but the point he made at the meeting was that, he at the present time doesn't have the staff that it would take. So either he's got to get the staff, or we got to hire somebody as an outside counsel to help us litigate these matters. And that's only the first step, because then we got to meet with the towns, we got to meet with the school districts, we got to identify the properties we want to address and get involved in the litigation of. There are court dates already scheduled for some of these, so we got to move quickly on this.
What do you mean
I wouldn't wanna
involved
see it.
in more important tax assessments?
Thank
What do
you.
you mean by that?
I'm sorry.
Well, how do you judge the important ones from the other?
Kitty, then Ira after
Really
Kitty.
decide.
Then
One at a
Sam,
time, please.
And then Cora.
All right,
That's
is
it?
Sam answering Kitty's question? Wait, one at a time, please.
We look through this list, and we've done this in the past. The one group that doesn't get involved, and Ira and I agree on this, I think as often as they should, are the school districts, because they got the lion's share of this. We've done it on a fairly high level when Mirren, a few years ago, tried to get a major reduction on all of the properties on the Mongo system.
That was the hydroelectric company.
Merritt owned them, now
Eagle Creek.
Eagle Creek owns them. In that one, we had to hire a very specialized appraiser. We hired outside
sold
counsel.
yesterday.
The Monticello School District participated, and it was a very good effort. But as Ira says, you have to, in effect, start by going to every town at this time of year, see if they will participate. It's not only their resources, whether they can fend off a tax cert by somebody who is well-heeled, getting a qualified appraiser. And in some of the cases we've had, and Ira and I have discussed this, some of the cases, the town has resolved the tax cert with a settlement. We're not a participant in it. We don't get to see what's happened if we're not involved up front. It's specialized work. You need somebody who knows what he's talking about in these cases. You need qualified appraisers in these cases. And what we talked about yesterday in real property was that, and I'll be talking more about this before next Thursday,
Good idea.
is to have this as a discussion today, and then what we would like to do is bring a resolution before the executive committee next Thursday to actually propose some concrete things and get the board's approval to do that. Ira?
Ira.
Again,
Go ahead, Ira.
logistically, when someone goes after, they start with the appraiser of the municipality. Are we and the school districts notified
Yes.
as interested parties when the process starts?
The law requires we get notified, but we have no right to
say.
participate
Right.
No
unless we,
stand.
unless we, excuse me?
We have no standing in the negotiations.
Unless we make a motion in court to intervene, or unless we go to each party in the litigation and give consent. We have this list because we get the law does require that my office, as well as the school business office gets served with any tax cert that's filed with the town. So we are on notice.
So I assume this is.
We have the opportunity to
This
look
is
at it.
municipal law, that we really don't have a say, so we have to go, if we wanna have some kind of say, we need to go through the state to.
No.
No.
We need
Yeah.
to become a party, in my opinion, in the litigation that we identify as important. We need to become a party so that the town has aid and our input, and that the town can't settle without our agreement, and the schools hopefully as well. And expert counsel to assist, and you litigate these
But
things.
that-
I mean, I was a town
That's the
attorney many
process,
years
but I'm just
ago.
saying,
Kathy,
we
yeah.
need to make sure that we have that right. And I
Yeah,
think you need to
right.
go through the state to get that.
Well,
That
right.
can't be county law to change
Oh, I mean,
that.
if you're saying we should work on the state to change the law,
Yes.
then that's a different issue, yes.
Well, I'm saying, because not,
10 years.
or have, to have an agreement with each municipality, you're gonna have to say that that they would agree to have us, if the law doesn't require them,
Right,
it's really, unless we do that, we
The courts.
don't have to be set at the
Well,
table.
we move to intervene, we hopefully in most cases the court will agree, but you're right, that.
Well, you can't do it on a case, if you don't know about
It's a-
it.
we
Well,
have
we
no
know
choice
about
right
it,
now.
but it's a
You
case by
said we
case
do know
basis.
about it.
Some towns welcome, some towns don't welcome.
Kathy and then Cora.
Okay, just back up a minute. Okay, so you're actually
Okay.
looking to, you're saying that you had an expert appraiser and an
There'll be
attorney?
more than one you have to have a list of appraisers.
Okay, and an attorney? That's, so you're
Right.
saying you would wanna hire 2 people to help you save money?
For this
this,
specific
okay.
project.
Can you guarantee that there would be a savings? I mean, can you sit there today and say,
I can tell you this, Kathy, I started to say a moment ago, I got my start in municipal law and government by being the town attorney in Mamakating 27 years.
oh, is that what happened to Mama Katie?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
I left my footprint.
Oh, you did a good job. Go ahead. But,
But, so after many years of experience in being involved in these issues, I can
Mhm.
tell you that if you're not at the table and if you're not at court, you're not participating, you're not gonna have any say in the outcome.
so.
I mean, we're looking at, I know Walmart did a tax cert a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
I mean, I think they started at, I think they were assessed for 13 million.
Mhm.
If you look at this list, there are properties here that are seeking reductions of millions of dollars. These are, so can we guarantee? No. But I can pretty much guarantee that if we actively participate, we will have a positive impact and save more money than we're spending. I think I can guarantee that.
A lot of these do not go to court. They get settled by people at a negotiating table where we are not present.
I see this more as a stop loss, but can you address sort of the larger picture? Because we don't want to be here next year having the same conversation again. We've had this around this time last year. With regards to the fact that there is Department of State funding to look at how counties can consolidate these kinds of services. Now I'm specifically talking about assessment, not record keeping or any of those others. Because my understanding is that when you start to look at the bigger picture of the kinds of assessed value that's not correctly taxed or tax exempt, we're not talking about millions of dollars, we're talking about billions. And we have to somehow get ahead, be more proactive than reactive in, I'm not saying we don't have to do something like this, because 70 million is a big amount of money to any budget. But can you address the bigger picture for just the overall view of how, if we could proceed with this kind of consolidation with the tax assessors across the county? Because, like you say, if we're not at the table, we don't have a voice.
A few years ago, I think when Spitzer got elected as governor, one of the appointments that was made on the state level was a new director of the Office of Real Property Services, which is now part of Taxation and Finance.
In the executive.
Up in Albany, and he was a man from Newburgh, New York, who only lasted a couple of years and then moved on, but spent a great deal of that time touring the state and prepared and talking about a lot of literature about what was wrong with New York State's assessment system. I mean, we literally have in New York thousands of assessing units. His name was Lee Kiriakou, some of you may remember. He was here at least on 2 occasions in Sullivan County making this discussion. And the long and the short of it, they also sponsored that $25,000 grant, which we were a recipient of, to discuss this and study this issue. And I think Mr. Kiriakou was astute enough politically to recognize that, well, everybody talks about the benefits of consolidation of services. When you get really down to specifics, there's always a great deal of pushback from the local governments. And otherwise, towns wouldn't be assessing units, counties would. And so he didn't come right out and say we ought to have countywide assessing all over the state, but he said we ought to move in that direction. And one of the ways to move in that direction, the real property tax law already has in place some provisions for cooperation by counties through intermunicipal agreements with townships. And it also has in place the ability for townships to work together by themselves without necessarily county experience, or I think a combination of both. I think there are 2 or 3 towns in the county now, I thought, that were working together on some assessment issue. I thought I had heard that. But if they're not, that is available under the law. So he brought that to everybody's attention because he recognized that that was an easier sell to try to convince the towns. Linda was at an assessing meeting this week and brought this up because we discussed it at the advisory board. And I know the assessors are on board with working with us on this issue, you know, helping with the assessment challenges. I'm pretty sure they're not on board with having the county as the assessing unit.
But there's an intermediary step.
There was an intermediate step. One of the things I suggested yesterday informally was, and I think you ought to think about, is why don't we invite the towns, the supervisors, the assessors, and the town attorneys here for a meeting with us, and let's discuss these issues, because it's really difficult to try to go to 15 towns individually and have this discussion over and over again. Although we've done it, it's not the most efficient way to do this every year.
I
It's a
think
good
that would be a
idea.
good idea.
Yeah.
Sam, that's.
This one's gonna sound very off the wall, but the assessors work for the towns. The towns have, as Ira said, about a 20% interest in the tax bill. We have about a 20% interest in the tax bill. We have no say in the assessment today. I'm gonna suggest maybe an odd suggestion, but I'm gonna suggest we consider something. Not that we have any funds in these tight economic times, but if we were to enter into intermunicipal agreements with the towns to, in effect, pick up 20% of the assessment budget in the towns, we would become one of the employers of the assessor. We would be at the table. We would have standing. It's a step towards countywide assessment. I don't know how it would be received. I don't know how we could afford it. But what I'm saying is, right now, assessors go out. We have issues with tax exemptions and all those kinds of things that happen without us being at the table at all. If we were a joint employer, so to speak, we might have some ability to have some input.
My only question with respect to that would be whether or not we have the authority statutorily to enter into such an agreement where we're not taking over the assessment function, we're just helping them with the assessment function. That's one question. The other thing that I think everybody's losing sight of is if all of these entities are successful in their challenges, and it's not necessarily that we're losing tax dollars. It would change the tax base and it would shift the burden onto other taxpayers. Because we still need a certain amount of money to run county government. The towns still need the same amounts of money to run the town government. the schools need the same amount of money to run their budgets. So it's really shifting the burden onto other taxpayers that at this point, I don't know whether they can
Right.
afford it.
So I think that's a good point, when if they can't afford it, then you're gonna lose the money, because you're gonna lose the services.
Ira, to what extent does the number of certiorari's that are being filed, are they a symptom of some of the municipalities having, spent the better part of a decade or more not doing a reevaluation?
I think it's a combination of that. That's been well identified. I mentioned before, I was town attorney Manicating 20-some odd years ago. We talked about it then, and we did our own reevaluation, and then there was a big move then for all the towns to do it. If you talk to anybody in Albany, they'll tell you got to do this. You should do it every year, which is really impractical, but I think the recommendation was at least every 3 or 5 years. I mean, there are towns who haven't done it in 10 or 20 or 30 years. And
Yeah, I know.
I think,
Afraid of the backlash.
Bethel was 1990.
so I think that's part of it,
Yeah.
Alan. I
I
think the
think
other
that
part
is-
of it is,
yeah.
Heresy.
That's why I asked the question.
I think the other part of it is the economy.
Now, excuse me.
People look around and say, my house is, I can't sell my house, I can't sell my business, it's worth less, but
Yeah.
the assessed value hasn't gone down.
Yeah. Katie, go
I
ahead.
think we can't see this as one size fits all. A house in the middle of a town that has all the facilities available to them, sidewalks, street lights, garbage pickup, everything available to them, is a different house than a house that doesn't have broadband, doesn't have street lights, doesn't have garbage pickup, and is out in rural wherever in this county. And I do not want to see those houses having the same assessed valuation because they're so much square foot. I would fight that tooth and nail.
Well, I think the difference is,
Proper
it's done by the
assessment should pick that
town,
up.
it's done at the town level,
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah.
Proper
So-
assessment should
It's also
pick
done
that
in
up. Those are the
neighborhood
type of things that go into an assessment.
Everything is taken into consideration when the
Absolutely.
assessment's being
Yeah.
done.
I think you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out the system is really broke. The
Yeah.
assessors have control, the towns can't control, even though they're an employee of the town. The assessor has their own control. But I think Ira has a great idea. If we sit and meet with all the municipalities and take an approach that it's a joint venture, that you're not gonna have to foot the bill yourself, that we'll have some resources from the county to put up stronger battles against this. It's almost like Sam's concept with giving someone a settlement in the jail. That even if it may be cheaper to give that settlement than go to court, that we need to start setting examples that it's not gonna be a pushover, and it's a step we're not gonna solve all the problems, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Well, I just want to be
Well-
clear
I
that this
just-
is an immediate step, right, that you're proposing. And then the second step for that is what you proposed before, where all of the assessors and relevant townships and villages come together.
Not
What-
village.
No, I think that's step one.
Step
Prior
one
to
is
this.
getting
Raising
buy-in
that.
from
One
the
quick
towns
question.
to come and sit at the table,
Sure,
correct?
Absolutely.
And then, as far as seeking the outside counsel
Kathy,
to
you'll
help
be next.
litigate, are there implications that the town, because if the towns are opposed to the county assessing, but they're willing to work with us on this issue, that shouldn't be a problem.
Right, well, that wouldn't be a problem.
That wouldn't be a problem. So we can go ahead with that and then set up a meeting, but how would you recommend getting towns to cooperate with that?
My experience has been, when we used to go a few years ago and talk to them, they're all very, you don't get many towns saying, no, we don't want you meddling in our business. Most towns welcome our assistance, but there's no concentrated effort to do this on an annual basis that's effective, and that's what we need to do.
I'm just
Kathy?
curious, have you reached out to the town assessors or the supervisors yet
This year?
Yeah,
No.
about this issue, because
No.
I would hate for them to be reading about it in the paper and then we're gonna get the calls and they're gonna say, I know what they're gonna say, go ahead.
I met with many of the assessors
Okay.
yesterday at the Assessors Association.
Okay, and so you had this discussion?
And I did have this
Okay.
discussion, and I did advise them that we would be having this
Oh, good.
discussion today.
And my if
Or the
you,
schools buying it?
if you wanted the supervisors involved, my suggestion would be, because, you know, most people work during the days, maybe one of Alan's meetings could be in night evening so that they
Sure.
could all come, because you really do
Yes.
want them all involved and all at the table, if you can have this discussion. So,
Well, I think I neglected to say, I said it earlier, and Sam made the point as well. It also includes the school district.
right, okay.
Right, so
Yeah,
they
and
would
I-
be at the
Right,
table as well.
Alan, I mean,
I agree. I'm happy to set up a meeting, you know, for an evening with the assessors
Okay.
and the supervisors.
And
I
school
think what we're
boards.
proposing, short-term, you know, with having additional legal representation is triage in some respects. But I think that discussion with the assessors and with the towns really has to get at the some of the underlying issues, which, you know, I think we're gonna have to put reevaluations on the table, especially for those towns where, you know, it's just the sheer number of certiorari's that are before them. That's I think part of the problem. So it's never a popular issue, but I think it's one that has to be put on the table, and that we have to have, you know, that discussion with them.
so is the resolution that's moving forward at Scott's executive is to hire a,
Ira and I'll talk,
Oh, okay,
Linda.
just-
will
They have to
come up with a
formulate
resolution.
that.
We haven't
Okay.
done it yet.
could we see it before
Yeah,
next Thursday?
absolutely.
Okay.
Because with that resolution, from what I understand, you're gonna address these, and identify the important properties, and
Yeah.
then you're gonna state whether you're gonna need one or two, and then the cost of that as well, so we can balance, weigh it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also a good time to, you know, when you do have all the supervisors there, to point to the underlying issue. I'm not sure the extent to which, you know, it's a separate discussion, I understand that. But as long as Sullivan County's revenues are primarily driven by property tax as opposed to retail sales tax, like every other county in New York State, we are in an inverse proportion, right? So, you know, that conversation can't happen without the other side of the equation, you know.
Ira, one thing I noticed on this list was a fair number of these folks that are seeking tax certiorari's, when I say folks, it includes corporations, have received IDA benefits. You know, Millennium's I see listed here. How does that, if they're successful, does that affect their pilot, or is that separate and distinct?
I'm not familiar with the, whether there's language in the IDA pilot agreements that would result in a renegotiation or automatic reduction of the pilots if the assessed value gets reduced. I really
Weren't most
don't-
of them expiring this year?
I really don't know
2013?
that, Alan.
Oh,
It's a good
okay.
question.
All right, maybe we can bring that question back to
Yeah,
IDA
I
council.
don't know the answer offhand, so I could.
No, it's fair.
Yeah.
I saw it there. I'm like, it's odd.
It's a good question.
Okay.
Well, that gets back to
All right, so we'll,
what's our
there'll be a
Maybe it should
resolution.
provision in the agreement, IDA agreements, where they don't seek a
They can't.
reduction if they get benefits
Right,
until the
right.
agreement's over.
Yeah. Sometimes until these things come up.
Yeah,
you
I know,
don't
right?
anticipate it. All right, so we'll look for executive committee to have a resolution coming from Ira and Sam. So I think that was a good discussion on the topic, and then we'll move to set up a meeting with the assessors and the supervisors and school districts on this issue. Anything else to report from county attorney or county treasurer? Okay. For planning, we have a resolution to modify the agreement between the county and rural Sullivan County housing opportunities.
Move it.
Second? Cindy? Okay. Any discussion? Call a question, all in favor?
5-0.
Okay. I do think it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Okay, real property. I'll read the resolution and if Linda, if you want to elaborate. First is to amend resolution 316 and 13 to correct the 2012 tax rolls for the town of Fallsburg for tax map 2815.7801.
This resolution came about last month. You approved a resolution to correct the tax rolls on this parcel. We had done, my office had done two different tax rolls in correcting these, this property. One was for the 2013 tax roll, one was for the 2012 tax roll. I inadvertently sent the wrong resolution. We had done the 2013 tax roll, I think either the month before or 2 months before. I inadvertently sent that resolution again for approval. The correction was for a sewer district charge that was in error. It is a town of Fallsburg expense, sewer district expense. It is not a county expense. And I would just ask that you approve that resolution with respect to the 2012 tax roll.
Motion by
So
Kath,
discussion.
second.
Yeah, I'm
Laura?
confused, sorry, Linda.
That's okay.
What triggered the first modification?
Well, they were correcting the tax roll. What happened was the town of Fallsburg had the incorrect number of sewer units on the tax roll. They had, I believe it was 88 sewer units when it should have been 14 sewer units. Because these are condominiums and 14 sewer units is the standard charge for condominiums in the town of Fallsburg. So they it was incorrect on the tax roll for 2 years, 2012 and 2013. I received the application for correction of error on the 2013 roll sooner than I received the one for the 2012 roll. And I just inadvertently sent the wrong resolution when I sent it up to Michelle to be added to the agenda. Does that answer your question?
You had discussed that last month.
Yes,
Yeah.
I discussed it last month. In fact, if you notice, the next resolution is also to correct the 2012 roll on a different parcel within the same condominium complex.
Okay.
And it's the same exact error.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor?
5-0.
Okay. Next resolution, to correct 2012 tax roll, Town of Fallsburg tax map 2850.7401. Ask for a motion.
So
Kathy,
moved.
second. Ira? All in favor? Okay. Passes unanimously.
5-6.
All right, I have departmental updates. Any?
May I
Ira?
quickly?
Yeah.
It seems like we've just finished talking about the June public auction, and here it is, the middle of September. So in a couple of weeks, we will be sending a discretionary letter for people who haven't paid their 2013 taxes, and then file a list on November 1st. More importantly, Nancy is already working on work produced by other members of the treasurer's staff to prepare for the foreclosure that will be commenced approximately a month from now. So about 1 month from now, by the time of the next meeting, we will have, or will be close to having commenced a tax foreclosure proceeding for 2012 delinquent taxes. And
It's not 3 years anymore.
one of
It's
the,
18 months.
so you should just be aware of that. And then the following month, we'll do the villages again, as we've been doing. One of the things that'll be different this year, remember the issues we had with the village of Monticello? Well, they have asked us, and we have finally renegotiated an agreement with them to do their foreclosures again, starting this fall. The mayor was in yesterday to introduce us to his new treasurer, who we'll be meeting with next week. We gave her a law book, said, here, go home and read this. And then we'll
Did she quit yet?
and then we'll talk to you about it next week. But we're looking forward to as much additional work as that's going to give us, and as much as taxing as that's going to be on my staff, which it is. It's going to generate some money for us. much of which will go to the county. And as I've requested in the past, and I'm going to request again, as particularly as budget time comes, I want you to set aside some of that money for MIS to help us develop foreclosure software, because what we're working with now has been
So-
patchwork for years.
How much money we talking about, Ira? Roughly?
I'd have to ask Lauren. It's totally up to Lauren. My suggestion would be to put somebody on Lauren's staff for a year, which is what it might take to develop this. But it'll be well worthwhile for us. It'll help us enormously, and it'll be probably something that you would be able to market throughout the entire state, because after all this time, there is still inadequate software, and everybody is using different things, and everybody's trying to find something that everybody can use, and I know we can develop it.
You know, Ira, one of our goals has been to keep as many people as possible in their homes, and the foreclosure rate has gone down from its peak, right? Last year was 450.
Last year was, I forgot how many we ended up with, because we do get quite a bit of few repurchases, so the last 2 or 3 years have been pretty high, and I'd like to see that go down to, a few years ago it was 111. We're back up to 350.
So we don't really know how, it hasn't been trending down, is what we're saying.
No, it hasn't.
Okay, so that's not good. But we do, as a county, have those 5 key dates where people have the opportunity. So those dates are changing this year from last year? They're exactly the same?
Pretty much.
So maybe we can have just one notice or something, just so that people aren't caught at the time of each of those cutoffs.
Yeah.
They're
And
late.
when I referred a minute ago to a discretionary letter that'll go out October 1st, it's exactly that. In other words, we do notices and letters, and we also, with Michelle's assistance, do, notices to the press. But discretionary letters, for example, are letters that are not required by law,
Right.
but that we do in order to, frankly, do 2 things. One, do exactly like you suggest, which is help people not get caught short and say, a month from now, this is what's going to happen. But we also find that by sending those letters, they generate a lot of revenue, because people do react to them.
So you do that now?
We do it.
And then there's also the installment plan, the repurchase plan, and then the final,
Right, there's the end of the redemption period.
and then there's
And then there's
the
the,
auction itself.
Right.
And for the letter that he's talking about that we're gonna send out in October for 2013 taxes, this will be the second letter that we've sent out this year for 2013 taxes.
And what came up at our last meeting is that if people are in arrears in 2013 and they're still in arrears of 2012, they have to pay 2012 before they
No.
can clear the books on 2013?
It's just the opposite.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you repeat that then?
Taxes get paid under state law in reverse chronological order. The most current first.
You have to pay 2013.
Yeah, I get that. I just was making sure that all those steps,
Letter.
they're kind of,
What are you doing?
It's
with it?
important for
Got
the
it
public
back?
to know.
yeah, it is, and anything we can do to make that
Yeah.
easier.
Corey, I'm sorry, just
No, go
another
ahead.
quick example. Years ago, we used to have our auctioneer go out after the repurchase program was over, because we knew what we were selling and what we weren't. 2 or 3 years ago, we moved it back to April 1st, 3 weeks before the repurchase period is over. They start posting the property, so that sometimes somebody will call a neighbor and say, hey, we just saw a sign go up on your property, and they'll come in and repurchase. So we do everything we can within what we think are reasonable limits. We don't believe in increasing the redemption period to the last date of the auction.
We haven't done that.
We think that's bad practice, but within those limits, we do whatever we can to keep people in their houses.
Thanks, Simon.
Okay. Is there any further discussions or comments from colleagues? If not, I'd like to go to public comment. Yes.
Just about the National Park Service, they are definitely moving out of the office in Narrowsburg because of rent, and then like today or tomorrow is their last day. And also, I don't know if you guys know, but the town of Lumberland has applied for a grant through the CFA process to purchase a riverfront property that would be for a visitor center to be operated in conjunction with the Park Service, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yes, I saw that.
We'll still follow up with Sean to get a sense, but thank you for that.
Something quick.
Tom?
The tax auction and the properties that are lost that way, I mean, that's just the last resort. People almost always lose their homes to the banks and to foreclosures before that. So the problem is a lot deeper than just losing properties to the county. And like I said at the last meeting, there's about 1,500 homes, a major realtor told me, that are going through the foreclosure process right now. He said that it's pretty bad.
Other public comment? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Alan, somebody made a suggestion.